So you have just done a very big financing round. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So just last week we completed a $175 million fundraise, and the company is now valued at a nice milestone of $1 billion.
And who was the investor behind that?
So the round was led by Daimler, and also participation from Didi, which is the largest ride-sharing company in the world, based in China.
So you're getting a car manufacturer and you're getting an industry peer as shareholders. Were you also speaking to financial investors?
Sure. So we also had the participation from financial investors as well, but we just saw that we really needed a strategic partner at this stage to take the company to the next level.
Yeah, because Daimler is in MyTaxi and others, and Didi, of course, has also strategic peers. So I guess you were looking at the value add. What did Daimler promise you? More than just doing a great deal for you.
So we see Daimler is actually probably the most forward-looking automotive in the world in terms of their investments to both shared cars and platforms like us, but also in terms of autonomous driving. So we see in the next 5 to 10 years that's an incredibly good partner to have.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about Taxify. I mean, the interesting thing is that you are operating in foreign markets, and in those foreign markets you often have local competitors. So tell us a little bit about how big you are, maybe number of rides and some idea about revenues maybe. Second, what are the countries you operate in? And thirdly, why do you think you have been successful?
Sure. So I think many of you might not know, but Taxify is actually the ride-sharing app covering the most markets after Uber in the world. So we're
how many countries are you in?
We're now operating in 26 countries, opening a few more in the next months. We just had a nice milestone of 10 million passengers on the platform, and we have 500,000 driver partners as well. So that's pretty rapid growth in under less than 5 years. And then the growth rate is still accelerating. So just in the past 12 months, we've grown 10 times, which is...
10 times?
Yes. So it's far greater growth than any other ride-sharing company in the world today.
So that makes you... Have you looked at number of rides globally? I guess you're like top 5 or?
Getting there. So as we are currently focusing on Europe and Africa, I think many companies just don't focus on these regions.
You told me the largest country is actually France, right?
Yeah, our number 1 country is France, but we're also actually the biggest ride-hailing company across Africa now, and also getting to that in Europe within the next few years.
And you work, because it's so complicated, you know, everyone has like a little nuance in their business. So just to be very specific on yours, you're working with the yellow cabs, with the established kind of licensed taxi market, and unlike Uber, you found ways to make it legal, or are you also in the gray area?
So I'd say the main differentiator we have is that we're very much localized. So we have countries where we operate only with yellow taxis. We have countries where we operate with private hire and compete directly with Uber or any other platform. And I think that's one of the main things that's been driving our success as well. So when we look at Europe, I think one of the key reasons why we have been successful is because of this localization. So looking at what others have done before us, especially, let's say, Uber, they just haven't actually focused much on working together with cities, which we have done. So despite, I think, them now trying to reverse the direction, in that sense, that clearly isn't the case. So to bring an example, then just 2 months ago, they exited Slovakia just because the law changed.
They exited?
Slovakia. So just 2 months ago, there was a new law, and they didn't want to actually adapt to that, and they fully exited the market. And there's other examples like that, like Hungary, Latvia, and more on the way. So we see that actually, despite the talk about working with cities, we actually see that that's not very much the reality on the ground.
Now, Tallinn is known for great technology. NOAH invested in Pipedrive. We had Pipedrive on stage. We got to know a little bit the ecosystem, and it's truly refreshing. How much you think technology has been a factor of you being successful? I mean, is it incredibly user-friendly? How much does that matter in a time where we believe you can buy ride-sharing applications as a white label, actually? Tell us what you think.
I'd say the technology is definitely one of the 2 key parts why we have been successful. So it's very easy to get started in the ride-hailing space. You can buy a white label app off the shelf. But looking at where the platforms are today, after 5 and more years of investment, it's a very different game at the top of the league. So in that sense, we see that having a great technical background in Estonia from companies like Skype, Microsoft, and many others that are present there, that has allowed us to scale significantly faster than others.
How big are you in your home market? I guess, when did you launch in Estonia?
So we launched a bit less than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I actually started the company right from high school. So I was 19 at the time. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I think that was a good choice as well. Otherwise, most people wouldn't have dared to go against
With what motivation did you start it? You wanted to copy something what you have seen before? I'm sure as a student you didn't take a lot of taxis. So how did you start with the idea?
Actually, what's a bit different in Eastern Europe is that taxis are fairly cheap compared to Western European countries. So actually, they're much more used. So what we realized there was that it was more of a quality issue, not a pricing issue. So I set out to solve that at first.
Okay, and how big you are in, like, you know, Get in Israel, Dave grew like to a really quite significant market share in his home market. What's the rough percentages in Estonia you saw from the taxi market? Is double-digit percentages?
Of course, in most of the countries we're in, we have, we have countries where we have 60% market share.
But that's on the online rate. Total market
of all the rides in the city.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's your most penetrated country?
Actually, it's Estonia.
Estonia.
We started there the first.
Well, so you can bring it really, really, really far, right? In Germany, it hasn't been so developed because you had MyTaxi, you had some smaller players, and then you had Uber, which was kind of in the gray area. Actually, not gray, but interesting. Do you think that the regulation in Estonia is easier for companies like yours to bring value to society than other countries?
Specifically in transport, we see that if you lower the barriers to entry, then the supply of drivers goes up exponentially. So if there's a big difference whether the license to start to drive costs you 50 euros or it costs you thousands of euros. So what we see is that the lower the barriers to entry, the more drivers you will have. Of course, this leads to more competition, better service, better prices for passengers. So we're definitely advocating for reasonable regulation, but it should be as easy as possible for the driver.
And it is easy in Estonia versus some
Across the board in Eastern Europe and Africa, the barriers to entry are very low, and that's one of the reasons why we're growing this fast as well.
Okay. Now, looking for the future. How old are you now?
24.
24. You're a lot taller than me. What's your plan? What do you want to do with the company? I mean, you have now all this long tail of countries. You said
26.
26 countries. What do you want to do with it, with the business? You want to sell to Lyft at some point, who is not international yet, or want to go public?
Well, we're lucky enough to be in a huge space. So transportation globally is about 10 times larger than the advertising space, where Facebook and Google operate in. So by that definition, there's room for 10 or 20 Google-sized companies in the next decade. So we see that this will also be done differently than in other spaces. So it will not be only run by Silicon Valley, but transport is much more local. So as we see across Southeast Asia, Russia, and China, the local companies will win. And if we can hold our position in Europe and Africa, then we expect to continue this growth path for a decade.
Now, will our conference attendees be able to book cars with Taxify in Germany soon?
Depends on the regulation.
And if there is up, you would come into the market?
Of course.
Okay. Well, we hope so. Thank you so much, Markus. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.